It all started on a warm summer morning in Virginia. The air was sticky with heat, and I could feel my scarf clinging to my neck as I stood outside the modest brick house. This was my first job in America, far from the dusty streets of Amman, where I grew up. Back home, I'd never imagined leaving my family or my small world, but life had a way of surprising us. The Martinzer, seemingly perfect family of 4 needed a nanny, and I needed the money. It wasn't just about the paycheck. It was about proving to my parents and siblings that I could thrive in a country so different from my own. I was 33, unmarried, and fiercely independent, a rarity for a Jordanian woman. Clara Martin, the wife, was polished and stunning. She wore tailored blouses and designer heels that clicked against the marble floors of their spacious home. She greeted me with a warm smile, her blonde hair swept into a bun, and spoke in that deliberate way Americans do, as though every word mattered. Then there was Daniel Martin, the husband. He was tall, with an easy charm that immediately put you at ease. His sandy brown hair curled slightly at the ends, and his laugh lines hinted at a man who had seen joy, not just stress. He didn't say much that day, just nodded politely and handed me a cup of tea. Their children, Lily and Noah, were 5 and 3, full of energy and endless questions. I was nervous, of course. I'd never worked as a nanny before, but Clara assured me my experience as the eldest of 6 siblings would suffice. She was kind, but I could tell she was a perfectionist. She handed me a thick binder of rules, meal plans, daily routines, emergency numbers, and even instructions for folding laundry. The first few weeks were uneventful. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., prepare breakfast, pack Lily's lunch for school, and keep Noah entertained until nap time. My days were filled with storybooks, finger painting, and chasing Noah around the backyard. At night, I'd retreat to my small room in the basement, exhausted but content. It wasn't until one afternoon, about a month into the job, that I noticed Daniel watching me. I was sitting on the kitchen floor, wiping up a spill Noah had made with his juice box, when I felt his eyes on me. "You're amazing with them," he said, leaning against the counter. I looked up, startled. "Oh, thank you, sir." "Please call me Daniel," he said, smiling. I nodded, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. It wasn't what he said, but the way he said it, like he genuinely meant it. From that day, I began noticing him more. How he always asked if I'd had lunch, how he offered to help carry the groceries, and how he lingered in the kitchen when I cooked. Clara, on the other hand, was often absent, busy with her high-powered corporate job. "Don't you ever get tired?" Daniel asked one evening as I was setting the dining table. "Tired of what?" "Of doing everything for everyone." I shrugged. "It's my job. I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be," he said, his voice soft. His words lingered with me long after he left the room. It was strange, being seen like that. In my culture, women were expected to give endlessly, to serve without question. But Daniel's words made me feel appreciated. I tried to ignore it, of course. I reminded myself of who I was and what I believed in. I was a Muslim woman, bound by faith and tradition. There were lines I could never cross, no matter how kind or handsome my employer was. But life, as I would soon learn, had other plans. That summer stretched endlessly, the days long and hot. Clara's work trips grew more frequent, leaving Daniel and me alone with the children. Slowly, the boundaries began to blur. At first, it was innocent. Shared jokes, stolen glances, and casual conversations that lasted a little too long. But deep down, I knew I was treading dangerous waters. One rainy evening, things shifted. The children were asleep. the house quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when Daniel walked in. "Need some help?" he asked, rolling up his sleeves. "No, it's okay. I'm almost done," I replied, but he stayed anyway. We worked in silence for a while, the air heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you ever miss home?" he asked. "Every day," I admitted. "But I came here for a reason." "You've sacrificed so much," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. I looked at him, surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because I see it. The way you put everyone else first, the way you never complain. It's rare." His words caught me off guard. No one had ever spoken to me like that, before, not even back home. I felt a strange mix of gratitude and guilt, as though I was betraying something sacred just by listening. "It's nothing special," I said, brushing off the compliment. "It is to me," he replied, his gaze locking with mine. And in that moment, something shifted between us. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was their rare connection, a spark, a silent acknowledgement of something neither of us dared to name. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Daniel and I became more reckless, consumed by the fire we'd ignited. Each moment alone with him felt like a stolen treasure, a secret I both cherished and feared. Yet, the more time we spent together, the heavier the guilt grew. Clara returned from her conference the following Monday. Her presence in the house, a stark reminder of the life Daniel and I were dismantling piece by piece. One evening, after Clara had gone to bed, I sat on the porch steps, staring out at the darkened sky. The air was crisp, the stars scattered like tiny shards of glass. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my shoulders, trying to block out the chill and the thoughts swirling in my mind. Daniel joined me moments later, his footsteps soft against the wooden floor. He sat down beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice low. "I've been thinking," I replied, not looking at him. "About us?" I nodded, my throat tightening. "Daniel, we can't keep doing this." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, it's complicated." "It's not just complicated," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "It's wrong. You have a wife, a family, and I've lost myself in this. I don't even recognize who I am anymore." He reached for my hand, his touch gentle. "You're still you, Aaliyah. You're the woman who loves my kids like they're her own, the woman who's brought life back into this house. Don't let this ruin everything." I pulled my hand away, tears stinging my eyes. "But it has, Daniel. Don't you see? We've ruined everything." For the first time, his composure cracked. "I love you, Aaliyah," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't lose you." His words cut through me like a knife. I loved him too, there was no denying that anymore. But love wasn't enough to erase the damage we'd done. The following week, I made a decision. I knew I couldn't stay not like this. The weight of what we'd done was too much to bear, and I couldn't continue living in a house built on lies. I began searching for a new job in secret, reaching out to agencies and families in need of a nanny. It wasn't easy. I'd grown attached to Lily and Noah, and the thought of leaving them broke my heart. But I knew it was the only way to save myself. The day I left was bittersweet. Lily and Noah clung to me, their tearful goodbyes breaking my heart. Clara hugged me tightly, thanking me for everything I'd done for their family. And Daniel. Daniel stood silently by the door, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. As I loaded my suitcase into the taxi, I felt a strange sense of relief. The house that had been both my refuge and my prison faded into the distance as the car pulled away. I watched the Martins' house disappear in the rearview mirror, my heart a tumult of emotions. The children's tearful goodbyes echoed in my mind, and Clara's hug lingered on my skin, her warmth contrasting sharply with the weight of the secret I carried. But it was Daniel's silence at the door that stayed with me. The Mosthis expression was a mix of sorrow and resignation. He hadn't said a word as I left, but his eyes spoke volumes, full of emotions I wished I could forget. I spent the ride in silence, staring out at the unfamiliar streets, my hands clutching my scarf. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe, even if the air was heavy with guilt and loss. I told myself I had done the right thing, even though every part of me ached. I had walked away, not just from the Martins, but from a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. Life had moved forward, as it always does. I was back in Amman, running a small community centre that offered classes and jobs for women. It was something I had dreamed of for years, a place where women could find independence just as I had. The work was challenging but fulfilling, and in this space, I began to piece myself back together. One afternoon, as I was organising a shipment of handmade goods for a local fair, a voice called my name. "Aaliyah?" I turned and froze. It was Clara. She stood in the doorway of the centre, dressed simply in loose linen pants and a plain blouse. Her hair had streaks of grey now, and her face was softer, less polished than I remembered. For a moment, I couldn't move. Memories of that summer came rushing back, sharp and vivid. "Clara?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" She smiled faintly, stepping inside. "I was in Jordan for a conference. Someone mentioned this centre, and I had to see it for myself. I didn't know it was yours." Her gaze swept over the room, taking in the colourful scarves and pottery lining the shelves. "It's beautiful." "Thank you," I said cautiously. My heart pounded as questions swirled in my mind. Did she know? Why was she here? "How are Lily and Noah?" I asked, my voice steady despite my nerves. "They're good," she said, smiling. "Lily's in 3rd grade now, and Noah just started soccer. They still talk about you, you know. They miss you." My chest tightened. "I miss them too," I admitted. We stood in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "I didn't come here just by chance, Aaliyah." Her voice was softer now, almost hesitant. "I've had a lot of time to think about that summer. About you. About Daniel." My breath caught. She knew. I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up a hand. "You don't need to explain," she said. "I think I knew. Even then, I saw the way he looked at you. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But deep down, her voice trailed off, and she sighed. "I'm not here to blame you, or him. I just needed to see you to understand." Her words left me stunned. "Clara, I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you or your family." "I know," she said, her own eyes glistening. "And maybe that's why I don't hate you. It's strange, isn't it, to feel betrayed but also grateful. You gave my children so much love, more than I ever could while I was too busy chasing a career." Her honesty floored me. "I didn't mean for any of it to happen," I said. "I was lost, and I let myself believe in something that wasn't mine to have." Clara nodded, her expression unreadable. "I've forgiven Daniel," she said quietly. "And I've forgiven you too. Life is messy, Aaliyah, but we can choose to carry the mess or let it go." Her words hung in the air like a fragile thread, tying us together in a way I never expected. For the first time, I felt a weight lift, a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. As Clara turned to leave, she paused at the door. "You're doing good work here," she said, her smile warm. "Don't let the past define you, Aaliyah. You're more than that." And just like that, she was gone. I stood there for a long time, the sound of the bustling centre fading into the background. Clara's visit was unexpected, but it felt like the final chapter of a story I had tried so hard to leave behind. And as I returned to my work, I realized something. I wasn't just running from the past anymore. I was finally moving forward,